Good evening. I was remembering just now a scene that I didn't live myself, so I don't actually have the memory of the experience. The memory of I have the memory of what I imagined when I was told this story. It was my mother who talked about a master, Gelek Rinpoche was his name, who lived in the United States. Really beautiful master. Many special qualities, and also a friend of Lama Gangchen. And in America, he had been invited for a conference. It was a dialogue and between him and an important Hindu master, and they were friends. And it happened that they they were on a they were on they were seated on the in a theater, and out of respect for each other, they were looking at each other to see who was going to speak first. I imagine how beautiful that moment was. We very often we speak on a very gross level. We need images, we need words. We need this when very often so much can be transmitted beyond. And I'm convinced about this. Certain There are studies on neurolinguistics. It's said that in communication, actually verbal communication is about 7% of what is transmitted with the words. And there's also the intonation, etc. Even, in my opinion, we smell things. So we smell the hormones of the others. And not just the dogs that can smell fear. I mean, we have many levels of communication, without even explaining the energetic aspect of communication. So word is quite limited. So I imagine the scene of these two seated on a stage, looking at each other, waiting to waiting and those who were there waiting to hear beautiful words, and instead they were uh, there with their beautiful presence. 40 minutes of silence. It seemed, hearing the story, that the silence between them, each one looking into each other's eyes, it was almost like a declaration of love, mutual respect. It must have been so beautiful. I told this story also because sometimes when I play the singing bowl, I would like to just stay seated quietly, which is so beautiful. But I think in the context that we're used to, it's difficult for us. It's difficult for us to stay quiet, to stay in silence with others. I mean, to stay silent with someone requires a tremendous amount of intimacy. Just being with someone, just staying with someone. We're not quiet watching a movie. No, we're the two of us, the three of us, or how many of us there are, and we are in each other's presence without actually needing to entertain each other, without needing to do something. Um, and I'm not talking about that awkward silence, or that eggshell silence. Those kinds of silences we know as well. Sometimes we know at the table it's better to stay quiet because we know any conversation that we touch on is going to end up in a fight. No, I'm talking about the silence where there's understanding, there's a respect, mutual respect and understanding, and this really requires a great amount of trust and an amount of intimacy. In any case, I invite you to create more silence in your life, in our lives in general. Not, I mean, there's the silence of sound, which is important, but also the silence of the senses in general, because there are 2 points here. Has nothing to do with what I wanted to talk about. The- and what I want to talk about is their waiting. But one point is this aspect of the sensitivity of our senses. Our six senses, five senses plus the sense of the mind. The more stimuli we have, and the stronger those stimuli are, the sensitive, the less sensitive our senses, kind of self-regulation. So when you hear a noise or a loud noise, we we're not the, we're not able to hear the softer sounds. And the softer the sounds, the greater our sensitivity to hearing. And the same thing with sight. You know, our sight adapts to light, and also with touch. The less someone is in contact with touch, the more sensitive one's touch is. Um, Also, with our palate, the same. Someone, for example, who eats spicy food a lot, the other flavors are not. One doesn't taste them easily. Instead, if you always eat something that's relatively bland, then you're able to really taste the subtleties of other tastes. So our senses are they adapt. The level of sensitivity of our senses adapt to the strength of the stimuli. So, of stimulus. If we want to increase that level of sensitivity, we need to actually diminish the amount of stimulation we receive. So this is one aspect. The the most important of our senses is our sixth sense. And it works in the same way. The more input we have, the more gross level our objects of perception, the less sensitive are our senses. So more conceptual thoughts we have, you know, or you know, or those connected to our five senses, but linked to our conceptual ideas, then the less we'll be able to listen to our more subtle subtle aspects of our sixth sense, like our intuition. For example, if we have very, very strong music and then it's stopped, it feels like it's total silence, and then our hearing adapts and we start hearing sounds nearby, even the one next to us who's chewing loudly, or other sounds, and in our mind the same thing happens. Among the various thoughts and the aspects of our mind, one of the most important is being able to listen to our own intuition. It's delicate. Th- there's a threshold. There's a division between intuition and paranoia. Um, Maybe at some point, but what happens is intuition, the intuition without that inner dialogue. If there's if there's inner dialogue, it's not intuition. Intuition is something that just comes, and we don't even understand well why or how. But if something comes from as a result of a whole inner conversation, that's not intuition. Instead, when it's something that you feel in your gut, from my experience, I'm not able to put it into words easily, but there is a clear distinction when it's intuition, when it's a projection. One one point of difference is the presence or not of this inner dialogue. So being able to listen to our own intuition is extremely important. Important on many levels. Being able to see, because I don't know how to put it into words well, but I'm convinced that we have the reality that we live, that we live conceptually on a with awareness is a more gross level, and then there are other things that that come into our lives, even on a subconscious level, and they create our reality as well. They connect. And when we're able to have a level of sensitivity, and this and we increase this level of sensitivity of our sense of the mind, because there are fewer stimulation. This allows us to listen better and to direct ourselves better. So silence, the science of sound, of silence of our sight, of our senses in general, but mostly the silence of our mind is an exercise that we all need to practice. So take a certain amount of time and dedicate it for that. And I'm not talking about meditation, I'm talking about relaxing our senses, which is different from meditation. Resting our senses is very important. I remember these, these, these businessmen, I'm not talking about the spiritual world, but businessmen that would tell me that when they wanted to understand something or touch some kind of intuition or have to make a difficult decision related to work, they would go walking in the woods. They wouldn't they wouldn't call up 20 different meetings to analyze everything, because we already have the information, but it's not enough to have clarity. We need other references. So this silence, going into the woods is silence of the senses, and that's one of the reasons why that helps, is because when we're it's not the reason, but it's one of the reasons. When we're in nature, what we see in reality, I mean, there's much more that we're able to understand, to see with awareness. I remember once I went into the woods with Pete, who takes care of our garden in Albagnano, our dear friend, our Australian friend, and going into the woods with him, he started explaining to me. It felt like I had arrived somewhere where I had never been. But for me, what was there was just a bunch of green things. Instead, he started, you see here, there's water. There's more water here. Because I can see that because there's this plant, and the fact that this plant is here shows that there's water. And here you can see, you can see that this kind of plant would attract lightning. And so if there's a storm, it's very important to stay away from a plant like this. I mean, he was able to explain so much and open my eyes, but most of us, I mean, except if we have a deep experience with the woods, when we go to the woods, what do we see? Just a lot of green things, mostly. Maybe you're able to distinguish one plant from another, but um, so this means that our mind rests more because it doesn't project onto too many things. When we go to the seaside, there's not a lot to project on, not too many objects that bring us back to some kind of judgment or projection. It rests. And I've had a similar experience. I I was actually on the train, kind of metro. I was in Beijing, and I was there. I needed to go to the airport, and it was snowing, so I decided to take the train. And I was in this train. There's a seat in front of me, and there was an advertisement in lots of advertising, but it was in Chinese, of course. And I said, how beautiful, I thought to myself, that the fact that I just don't understand anything. Just allow my mind just to rest. Because everything I see and I read, there's a part of my attention that is taken by that. The advertising is crazy. Messages that we receive in every moment, in the elevator, in the car, the billboards, on the phone. This input that we're receiving, a part of our mind is taken up by that. When we don't, when we have very little on which to project our mind, it allows our mind to rest. So nature has this characteristic. On the other side, one can say, well, why are we not you might say, why are we not in a in a room with white walls? There's so much input here. And Lama Gangchen would say, every time we see something, what we see, it leaves an imprint on our mind. It's impossible for us to be indifferent to something that we see, that we perceive. There's also this rule of physics that I continue to repeat, that wherever there's interaction, there's transformation. And when I see an image, there's transformation, there's interaction. And so Rinpoche said, he would say, it's important to have many images that bring us something positive and virtuous. So our mind is constantly connected to that. And so that's why he put sacred images everywhere. In the Gompa of Abbagnano, he said, he said, he, he said, is put. I mean, he wasn't worried about the artistic aspect of it. He just wanted sacred images everywhere, and so we found this technique called the tattoo wall, so that we were able to realize what he wanted. So. So generally speaking, except for the situations like I said, that I mentioned, our mind is not in a rested state. It gets tired. But being able to rest our mind is extremely important, especially if we need to take deeper decisions, if we want to observe ourselves, if we want to give a certain direction to our life. This whole process of silence is extremely important. Obviously, we go to silent places without our cell phones, and not even on airplane mode, without that object there. The more you're able to do without your cell phone, the better off you are. I remember a couple years ago, I went to talk to a group in Brazil. They were businessmen. They invited me, and as I was talking, I asked them, what's your greatest object of attachment? And the answer, my answer would have been, the strongest attachment that we have is the reality, the way we think it should be. And there was a man who said, no, my cell phone. And somehow it's true. It's an it's an object. We s- we see that object and we say, Zahum Bam Ho, when in our meditation practices, when we say Zahum Bam Ho, it's to become inseparable from our object of meditation. But here we're inseparable from our cell phone. So if you want to go take a walk, leave your cell phone at home. It seems strange to say it, get courage, uh, you know, you know, get up the courage to do something without your cell phone, And then you might think, oh, what if somebody calls me? Well, if it's important, they'll call you back. Or if you need, if you get lost, maybe there's somebody there who can help you find your way. I mean, it's strange. Go somewhere without your cell phone. We feel like we're doing something odd. We're cheating on our cell phone somehow, but we need to rest our minds. We need to rest our senses. And one of the greatest signs that we need to rest is when one is so tired but they're not able to sleep. There are times when someone is so tired but is not able to rest. Because when we go beyond that threshold, instead of resting, we're still using up energy. Similarly, another sign that we need to rest, to rest ourselves from stimuli, is when we set these stimuli aside and one has this kind of attraction, this strong desire, when you need some other kind of stimulation, just like being quiet, or one one needs to take a bus and the bus is late and you need to wait for 15 minutes. Normally, what do we do? You just you do something, you look for some kind of stimulation. It's the cell phone aside, and now it's the cell phone is immediate. Okay, 15 minutes. We could say, oh, how wonderful. I can sit for 15 minutes and rest my mind. I can sit here and wait. I can look around and observe the landscape. I remember once, um, I um, I remember an interview with a writer, and he said that one of the greatest qualities of a writer is the ability to observe, and he would write at night, and he knew the time of night, what time it was, based on the smell. Is that every hour of the night had a different smell, and so there's this ability of observation, or just staying. I'm not talking about advanced spiritual practices. I'm talking about basic but very necessary abilities. Just being able to stay, to observe the world around you, just to find marvel in the beauty of the world around you without taking a picture of it, without having to say, "Wow, look at this sunset that I'm experiencing, and I would like to share it with you." No, live it. Live it for yourself. Live that moment for yourself, not so that you can show it to others later. No, live it for yourself. Allow yourself that. It's something simple, but it's I feel more and more we're losing this ability. Like it's like we get bored so easily now, and in the sense we because when you feel bored, it's a state of anxiety. What do I do? There's nothing to do. There's the feeling bored is a state where one lacks certain stimuli, and the lack of those stimuli generates an inner state of anxiety. Instead, it's very important for us to go beyond boredom, allow ourselves just to be, to rest, without having to do something, without having to keep our mind on something. And there'll be a moment if we do this that it'll feel like we're not doing anything. And mm, maybe one feels even more tired, but then if you do this with constancy, you're able to create this space at a certain point. You start you start feeling this greater sensitivity, this greater clarity, this intuition, ability to observe. It's easier to take decisions. There's more inner space. It's difficult. It's difficult to take decisions when we have feelings that are just riding over, competing with each other. And make taking decisions creates stress. When we're able to create more space, those same situations, we live them in a completely different way. And what happens is, just a very short time ago, these spaces, the space of silence, they were just natural, they were inevitable. A bit like what would happen in music if you took away the silence. It becomes just one loud one noise, one single noise. And somehow in our life we are taking away those intermittent spaces. And what's important to have those spaces. You know, for example, if we're talking, I have some feelings that come up. I'm just not, it's not simply seeing another person. There are inner process of feelings of gratitude or jealousy or whatever it is. And after that meeting, we are ourselves with the feelings that were generated, and we need to elaborate them. So those spaces in between are precious. It seems like you're not doing anything, but you're doing so much. The spaces where it seems like you're not doing anything, you're actually giving yourself the a possibility to elaborate this energy. And it's a little bit similar to the process of the learning process. The experts in learning and memorizing, um, there's certain tech, there's certain advanced techniques to learn languages or this kind of thing. One of the things that is there that the study should be divided between time of study and time of rest. You know, where you're not focused on that, because what happens is the moment after the reading where you're acquiring the information, that part after where you're not thinking about anything in particular, you're not acquiring new information, you need to elaborate that information, you need to digest it. If um, we just keep putting stuff inside, it's just going to overflow and there's no time to digest. Very short time ago, to go from one place to another, it wasn't so fast. We needed much more time. And mm, and even when, even 20 years ago, for example, when you would take an airplane, what would you do in the airplane? You would travel. That was what you did. Today, what do you do in the plane? You work, you watch 4 movies, you eat, you can see it. You know, when you get on an airplane, as soon as you sit down, the plane hasn't even taken off, and you see what films you're going to watch. You set up your computer, your Wi-Fi, your there that time in between to travel is not there anymore. You finish one thing, you go right to another. This space in the middle is really important. If we develop um, a high ability to not mix information or emotions, is important. Okay, but many of us are not able, not ready to do that. We need time to elaborate things, to digest our emotions from between one experience and another. So creating these moments where it seems like you're not doing anything is fundamental. And there are certain people, for example, according to the work, the kind of work they do, um, if they're able, even just having to commute is wonderful. Of course, the stress of the highway, that's something else, you know. So you need to consider both aspects. But for example, just finishing your job and then being immediately home, or like many of you have experienced, you working from home. Um, you finish something and then you're already there. You don't even have time to make yourself a tea. Uh, So you missing that time to set aside the tensions of work, or um, and then allow yourself to be home with your family, etc. These pauses in the middle, they're very important. Don't have to do it, doesn't have to be driving in the car. It could be a walk, some kind some physical, some movement, or or just being, where you're not actually producing something. I mean, or art, you know, not art, just that ability, just the act of creation. Um, this where we're not acquiring, we're not making something, but we're doing. So I invite you each to create these spaces in your lives. Unfortunately, we have this idea that when we're not producing something, we're just wasting time. I don't know if I'm wrong. I hear people, "Oh, today I didn't do anything." Oh, how great! It means that you did a lot. You did a lot um, of something else. Um, so when no, doing nothing, just staying, just being able to do that. It's not that easy. I mean, it's easy, but it's not so simple. We're just not used to it. So I invite you to create this space in your life. And the other thing that adds onto this is every time that we take a decision, this process of making this decision creates a slight or great tension. There's a level of stress, even chemically speaking, every time that we need to take a decision. It's said that in our modern life, we actually make 35,000 decisions a day. Should I do this? Should I do that? And the greater impact that decision has on us, the greater the stress. I don't know if it's ever happened to you. You've gotten to a restaurant and been stressed by the menu. And now what am I going to order? Oh, am I going to like this? Am I not going to like this? Is it what I want? Is it what's good for me? I mean, does it generate tension or joy being able to choose? For you? For me, it generates tension. Yesterday, we went to a restaurant. I always ask for the same thing. I know it works. I like it. Fine. My body accepts it well. I'm boring. I am really boring. But that aside, this fact that, like in our everyday lives, we should try to diminish the choices that we have to make. I don't know if it seems normal or healthy, but when I was a child, they didn't ask me what I wanted to eat. I don't know if, well, when you were 5, 6 years old, they asked you, what do you want to eat? They didn't ask me. Or how do you want to get dressed today? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? W- We weren't asked when we were children, not so much. Um, I mean, hopefully that our parents made healthy decisions, but we have this idea today that to be happy, we need to be able to do what we want, when we want, and how we want it, as if we were born with an amazing level of wisdom. And I see these poor children, even they're little children. I want this. I want that. At first, I was shocked. I was in the airport in Linate, Milan, on the way to Holland. I was waiting for my flight. There was a family next to me. I was there. I was observing the situation a little bit, and I saw at a certain point this child that started crying desperately. There was the mom, the mom and the child, and the mom would say, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" I imagine the mom is there. There was some kind of restaurant. This baby starts crying. Maybe the mother feels a little, no, upset. What's wrong? And then I understand. The mother was saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I didn't know that you wanted it." It actually, the mother had opened up these potato chips. Just in an automatic way. She just opened, but the child wanted to be the one to open up the pack of potato chips, and she didn't let him open up the potato chips. And she was apologizing to the child, saying, I didn't understand that you wanted to open up the chips. And so, what happens in the mind of the child? Well, the mother's actually apologizing to the child that she hadn't understood that he was the one who wanted to open up the chips. That it's right that he should be able to have what he wants, when he wants it, and how he wants it. I mean, that's what she was teaching him. I don't know. Okay, we open up a whole other topic here, but my point is not always, but sometimes giving too much is too much. For example, with the dogs, let me give you an example with the dogs. I learned that with the dog has very clear dynamics, and the dog needs to be clear about his role. If you give a lot of importance to the animal, you put him in a position of of superiority and to be like the head of the pack, and so he needs to make decisions for the pack, and then that creates stress for him. So he needs to feel actually safe. It's not him who needs to choose certain things. I've seen these dynamics very clearly. At a certain point, then the dog could relax. Don't need to ask him always what he wants. So generally speaking, what we want is for others to be well. And we human beings, we taking taking decisions is not something that generates calm and balance. Many generate a lot of stress. I was reflecting on this the other day, and it came to my mind that this difficulty, um, just the difficulty that the young people find themselves in today, certain maybe certain maybe certain decisions we don't even take, but having that possibility, opening up our mind to taking these decisions is already is stressful. We need to first of all, they need to to decide what they want to study, what kind of job they want, um, or or do I want to have sexual relations with men or with women or with both, or do I want to be a woman? Do I want to be a man? Now there are like 13 categories. I saw a video some time ago. A friend who was teaching in school. She was a friend in Spain. She was teaching children, and I show this video, and I didn't even understand it. All these different, like 13 different categories. I have tremendous amount of respect. I have no preconceived idea about this, but we have this tendency of going to extremes. So what happens is the the fact that we don't respect someone who has a need of a certain kind. We've gotten to this. We've we've opened up the door to possibilities that to most people don't wouldn't even consider. You know, with all my respect, someone really, I don't have any kind of judgment here, but what's important is who you are and how you act in this world. Um, if you're a person of love or kindness, or you know how you are and how you act in the world, this is what's important. But how you dress, or what are your choices? Like when they asked Lama Gangchen, what did he think about homosexuality in Brazil? They asked him, what do you think about homosexuality? And Rinpoche said, for me, homosexual means home sex. Because what you do at home is your business. And that's what he said at the time. So the point that I want to share, I mean, really, I have no preconceived notion about this, but we get to a point where you open up a range of possibilities that maybe someone wouldn't have even considered. And they're not simple, unimportant questions. And this increases our level of stress. I mean, many of us don't even have to, dream about making certain choices. Starting from the most simplest, from starting from the simplest, like how to dress yourself. Because the way I dress is connected to how people see me. So what kind of image do I want to give to the world? So in reality, just even as small children, having to choose what we want to wear is stressful. I remember a child of my cousins who lived in the United States. They're very easygoing people, and they had this child, even when he was very small. And at the time, he wasn't even speaking. At a certain point, he would get his pajamas dirty or something. He was maybe 1 year old or something. And when they would change his pants because he got his pants dirty, and they would change the pants and then not change that it wouldn't match the top, and the child would start crying, and they wouldn't understand. The parents didn't understand, and then they started to understand that they needed to change the entire outfit. It needed to be matching outfit, even as a very small child. And then, as he grew up, he he was really fixated on fashion, and I mean, there are those who are a little bit out of norm, but for most of us, it's something that these kind of choices generate stress and they occupy space in our minds. So it's beautiful to have freedom, but it shouldn't be imposed. I don't know if that's clear what I mean to say. Even have this freedom to not have to choose, to not have to choose. So, what I mean to say, what my reflection is, let's try to diminish stimuli on one side and the need to make decisions on the other so that we can, little by little, we can relax more and more, create space. One last thing about this. When we take a decision, together with that freedom of taking that decision, there's also the responsibility of the decision we take. That generates not only during that decision making process, but also afterwards. If I take a decision and it doesn't go the way I would have wanted, it generates more stress. But but if it wasn't my decision and it was just like this, and then something and the result is not how I wanted, the stress is less. They actually did a study where they gave they they gave prizes of trips, and so two people, a weekend or a week, I think it was a week, and they gave you a trip, and there were three categories, three types. The first prize, you needed to go somewhere. You couldn't choose where or when. You just won that prize. The second type of prize, you won the trip. You could choose where, but not when. In the third type, you could choose where you wanted to go and when you wanted to go. If I offered you now these three possibilities, you would choose the third category, right? So, and then during the trip, they all needed to fill out this questionnaire for the level of satisfaction that you had, and how happy they were about the trip. Those who were the most, those who were the happiest, were from they were from the first category. The more, the the more the more ability you had to choose, the lower your level of satisfaction. Imagine you win a trip and you don't know, you're not allowed to say where or when, and it rains. You say, okay, well, it went like this. Instead, if you were able to choose when, then you're upset. You said, oh, I chose this week. You know, there's a there's a friend, for example. I had his friend who and his friend who took a long, long time to choose clothes, shoes, for example, would go 25 stores and then finally make a decision. And even after having bought a pair of shoes, would go and see other stores to see what he could have bought. No, okay, we take the responsibility. I take the responsibility to go here. Oh, maybe that other place would have been better. You know, so for now, with these three categories, which category would you choose? It's difficult to say that first one. We think that the third is the best. We're sure that we would make the right choice. This is a crazy illusion. I don't know where this comes from, this idea that if I can do what I want, when I want, how I want it, I'll be happier. A little bit like we live in this epic, this time of optionals. And it's stressful. It's said one that one of the cars that was what the car that was sold, that it said that one model of cars that was the most widely sold was this like black Ford. It was just one model. It was that was the only one, and um, and that's the one that people were most satisfied with. In my opinion, there are certain dynamics that in the immediate time generate pleasure. You know, like kind of a flash of pleasure, a little bit of dopamine. But afterwards, that creates a dissatisfaction. And many of our choices are like this. So look at yourself. What are the choices that you need to make, and what choices are secondary, or and try to create more space and see what really is not necessary. Last week we talked about the the beauty of of the beauty of inner space. Those who are able to take this time, reflect on things, take the time to read, to to be with oneself. It's less and less. We're always filling it up with other things. And we need to create that space, otherwise it just doesn't come. When we have space, then we can create, we can direct that space. And among the various things, there's the thing that we can create, the most beautiful thing we can create is ourselves. And how can I transform myself? How am I transforming? There's a phrase that I heard today, um, and it was a phrase by Van Gogh. It was something like, first I dream my paintings. I dream about my paintings to then paint my dreams. So first we need to dream. We need to dream. We need to dream of our own creation to then create our the dream of ourselves in imagining, in directing. There's a part that's infantile is not the right word. But there's something innocent, naive. Like, how beautiful if I could be like this without thinking, oh, well, how much energy it's going to take, how much it's going to cost, is it going to be possible? No, allow ourselves to just let go, but in a certain direction. And what I realized that for most of us, it's difficult for us to have a direction mid and long term. When we talk about who we want to become, um, we say, where do I begin? And in Buddhism, there are parameters, there are reference points, and some, there's various sets of three things. Ke-tsung, Sang-tsung is one of these sets. Ke-tsun, Sang-tsun. Kepa, Sungpa, and Sampo. And the Tibetan language is quite particular, and that's why reciting in Tibetan is really beautiful, because most of the words are two-syllable words. So there's this really beautiful metric, and then many two-syllable words can become one. So Kepa, Sumpa, and Sampo, and Sum means three. Ketsun Samsun, Kepa. These are important qualities along our path. And many the to be developed and some that have already been developed. So Kepa means having a good level of understanding. It's a part of a conceptual understanding, but also the ability to discern, to see things, have a level of comprehension that's not superficial. Um, it's comprehension. It's very important to know the world, to know ourselves. It's important to study. Study not to do something, study to know, for knowledge, knowledge for knowledge's sakes, to have a greater level of discernment, to be able to really see reality, live the world on a deeper level. And here we need to read a lot. We need to listen and talk about and uh, discuss. And what's interesting is this process of learning, acquisition, comes through through comes through activities that are much more active than um, than passive. It's an learning is an active activity, but very often we've made it passive. When we're when we're talking to someone, it's it's relatively it's an active passive. But if we're working instead on some kind of technology, it's for example, when I was able to study, first I would do this. I would go to teachings, I would record the teachings, then I would go home. I would listen to the teachings again and I would stop. I would do it in two different ways. I would write out a summary, or I would divide the structure and I would make a kind of index of that recording, so then I could go back to those specific parts of the teachings. Actually, from this, this is the streaming is the reason why I did all of this, because it was really beneficial for me to have access to the teachings after having listened to them live, let's say. So reading and listening, and this was all very, it's active. It's in my opinion important. Being wise in the sense of not in an intellectual way, but acquiring knowledge that is not only theoretical, but developing a vast and profound understanding. And this touches our own paradigm. And so, for this, it's really important that we never stop learning, never stop studying, never stop being curious. Admit that for me, when I'm in front of something and I realize that I don't understand, I think, oh, how wonderful, something I can learn, this constant curiosity, this desire to want to see and to learn. Normally this happens during our childhood and then it passes. Instead, it's something we need to constantly cultivate. It's really important. This beauty of learning things, even learning things that might seem useless. Where instead, there's n- there's no piece of information that we learn that remains detached from us. For example, when we have to take a decision or when we have to make a judgment, this is like this or like that. How do I see it? How do I live it? The resources that we have to take that decision, to make that discernment, are not external resources. They're acquired inner resources, the information that I can, the information that I can get through my cell phone, it's not information I need now. I need to have that information within to make that judgment. And very often take, we we make decisions, we access information that we we don't even realize that we're accessing that information specifically to make to this decision. So this first characteristic that's given is this kepa in Tibetan that we can translate as knowledge or wisdom, wise, like a vast and profound wisdom. A learned person would have this. Learned person, not just with information, but a deep, a deeper understanding of things. This is a quality that I think we need to develop. The second one, sumpa. Sumpa means being a person who has a moral conduct that is healthy. Let's say it like this. Tsumpa is someone who has control over his body, speech, and mind, has a way to interact with others that is peaceful, loving, virtuous. It's also it's the ability to abandon what is bad and cultivate what is beneficial. It's a healthy conduct, healthy behavior. This is an incredibly important quality to develop because at the end of the day, what happens is we shape ourselves, we transform based on what we do, on the base of what we interact with. It's important to have knowledge, but it's not enough. Otherwise, we fall into that category of someone who knows a lot and and does differently. He acts in a way that doesn't match what he already knows. It's really important for there to be this coherence between what we know and this coherence between what we know is right and what we do. So this part of Tsumpa, this is where the various vows of not killing, not killing, not stealing, not lying, not having a wrong sexual conduct, not taking substances that um, that cloud our mind. These are very important to have these to have this right conduct. It's not always easy, but it's incredibly important. And the third example means having a good heart. Means being able to see others, have this feeling of love and compassion, have attraction and affection for others. Because one can be very learned with a lot of knowledge and not have a good heart. One can have a good heart and not have a lot of knowledge. One can have good, good knowledge, a good conduct, but not have a good heart. Or you can do, you can make up the various combinations, but the best would be to have all three. So when we talk about the qualities of someone along their spiritual path, along their life, or when we're looking also for our masters, among the important qualities are these three: knowledge, conduct, virtuous conduct, and a good heart. These are the three things that we need to work on because at the end of the day, I mean, these three don't come from nothing from one day to the next. They need to be cultivated. And if at the end of the day someone says, well, what do you do? What do you do? I cultivate knowledge, experience. I maintain a healthy, virtuous conduct, and I cultivate positive qualities, a good heart. Well, what is it that you do? That's what I do. No, no. What do you do to live? Oh, okay. For my livelihood, I work in a restaurant, mm, or whatever it is that I do, which is absolutely fine. But in doing that, I'm also working, I'm cultivating these other things. Because this morning in Albagnano, I was talking about a pure land. What's a pure land? Unfortunately, when we see things in Buddhism, inevitably we take um, references from our own we take our own reference points. So when we talk about Pure Land, we think about heaven. But what is a heaven? It's a marvelous place, right? I've never seen it. At least I've no remember if I have seen it. I mean, it's described as a marvelous place where there's everything one would want. And one is free from everything one wouldn't want, and it lasts forever, right? More or less, it's like this. And I was thinking, um, I'm thinking, well, I'm gonna meet that person there, my great grandmother. My great grandmother, she really followed this. And oh, so you meet that person, but th- so so my great grandparents, grandfather died at around 70, and she died almost 100. So how is this meeting going to be? It's someone who. So I ask myself, how does this all work? One dies young, one dies older. I don't know. These are things that just occupy mental space. But what I mean to say is, what is heaven? Normally, it's described as a special place, and in Buddhism, instead, a pure land mm, is a place where what makes it pure, what determines the purity of that place, are not the external characteristics of the place, but the inner qualities of the beings who abide there. So, for example, I mean, this planet, if it weren't for the stupid actions of humans, wouldn't it be a heaven? I mean, there are resources for everyone. We could live well. Why, why, why are we not able to do so? Because there's anger, there's resentment, there's hatred, there's arrogance, there's miserliness, there's attachment. There's this obsession with self-gratification that is crazy. Last week, if I remember well, we talked about this movie um, and translated as the platform that really showed this dynamics. It's one really needs uh, you need a. It's not easy to handle this movie. So the resources on this planet that we have them. It's a marvelous planet. But let's say at a certain point we destroy this planet, and let's something strange happens. We're all reborn in a pure land, and we all go to this pure land. What happens to this heaven? I ask myself. Because when we all, just imagine all of Milan, not just those here, all of Milan in heaven. There's, there's, there's a Milanese quarter in heaven. I mean, our own inner dynamics we're taking with us, aren't we? A little bit like if if there's tension within a family, if there's conflict, that are, and maybe there's conflict within a family that have to do with their daily life, and then the whole family goes on vacation. Maybe at first it seems like if everything fine, because there's lots of activity and distractions, but then every but after a certain time, those dynamics sort of come out. So when you're thinking about a vacation with a family, you really need to think about the time that you want to allot to that vacation together. Is it a weekend that you can manage to be together, or is it a week? You know? So a pure land instead is a place where the majority of the beings who live there have the majority have a high level of love and wisdom, etc. It's a place, for example, imagine you go to the bar and the barman is like Lama Gangchen, a being of wisdom and love. And you take a taxi and the taxi driver too. Wherever you go, they have a high level of consciousness and awareness. This is a pure land. And this is what we can create. Even looking at this planet where we live, this planet, this society, what it needs most, it needs people with higher levels of consciousness. Higher levels of consciousness, I mean a real level of love and respect and gratitude and patience, peace. This is what we need. This is what our families need. It's what our planet needs. So when someone asks, "What do you do?" I mean, everyone can answer for themselves. But if we're able to say, you know, what I do is I cultivate conscious knowledge, awareness. I cultivate a virtuous conduct and a good heart. I try to love myself as best I can. I try to love others and have a coherent view of reality. In other words, in my life, I walk towards being a better version of myself. This is what I do in my life, and my objective is to die a better person than the one who was born, which is already a lot, because getting to this life in the middle of all these, you know, all this high water, you know, and getting to the end and adding up everything that we've lived and done. You know, if we're a better person than the one who was born, then chapeau. It's not obvious. Being able to heal our traumas, to 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 get to the end of our life, and if we could possibly have at least these two levels of spiritual realizations in front of life. It's said that a spiritual practitioner, when faced with death, there are levels, two levels. The first level, there are three levels. The first level is arriving to death without any regret. How can I face death without regret? It means that getting to the end of every day, the end of every week, without regret. Because if you're full of regret, then when death comes, it'll be there. We don't know when we're going to die, but it will come because there's no alternative. And when it comes, that first level is being without regret. I should have done this. I should have said this. I shouldn't have done this. It would have been better if I had done this. No, we need to be at peace with ourselves. And that's a lot already. That's a hard work. It's not something that comes without effort. The second level is getting to one's own death without regret and without fear. And this requires having cultivated during life an identity that goes beyond this body, having cultivated a life that is coherent, where we have inner resources and that we know we are going to take with us, this attitude that says, wherever I go, no matter what happens, come what may, I have the resources to face what's in front of me. So I'm at peace. So one gets to one's own death, where one is at peace with his past and at peace with the future, and also at peace with that present moment too. So these two levels, it's something that we need to train in. We need to give a tremendous amount of energy to this. This reminds me of the title the the title that my mom gave to a book that she wrote, which is "Death." Um, Death does not. There's there's no improvising death. We need to prepare ourselves. When when a relationship ends with someone or a job finishes with someone, how important is the way that that experience ends? It's important. It's important for the next one that's going to come. I mean, it can happen that someone ends a relationship with someone badly and stays trapped in that, was never able to come out of that negativity. Maybe it's not able to create that space, and maybe when they create a new relationship, they're they, they're still stuck in the negativity of the previous relationship. Instead, when you can close something well, that allows you to open up the next step, the next relationship well. So dying well is the basis for continuing well, and it's fundamental. So it's no joke. It's not a joke that we're saying just like this. No, it's just to be taken very seriously. And I don't know what the dynamics are behind this, but it seems like the things that are really are important, the more the more critical they are. We have this sort of self defense that um, that makes it light. I don't know how to explain. So I don't know if you've understood that we are going to die. And we don't know when. It could even be today, right? I don't know. Does someone have some kind of reasoning? Someone has a reason why it can't be today? You say, oh, well, I'm young. But death, let's create this image of death. Um, if I told if I told if I told death that I can't die because I'm young, he would say, well, since when do young people not die? Or I have a really good heart because the good ones don't die either. Oh, but I have many resources. I'm a good friend of the Lama. Everybody laughing. And so, since when has that been a reason to not die? Uh, Sometimes it's also the opposite. In in Brazilian, we say, like it's kind of the opposite. We say, like ugly vases don't break. So what's our excuse? What reason do we give that today we are not going to die? Really? Okay, the jokes here and there, but what what is the reason that we can give to say, today I am not going to die? I don't have one. I can't find a reason. And here you see the level of craziness that we live in. Even if we say it, even if we try and we can't find a reason, inside, what are we telling ourselves? Today, I'm not going to die. It's not going to be today. I have things to do. I can't die today. No, we have the Yamantaka empowerment this weekend. I need to. I'm on my way to the United States next week to go to meet Trisha Rinpoche. But I think most people have died, had something to do the following day, right? So give me one reason why today is not my day to die. I can't find one. And the problem isn't dying. The problem is dying badly. The problem is getting to our death and not being prepared, and having regrets, being afraid. The the greatest problem is not living life well. So we don't really have we don't have a life to waste. I, and now I go back to that question I asked. What do we do? What do you do in your life? That's the marvelous answer. What do you do in your life? I'm preparing myself for my death. What? Yes. How am I preparing myself for my death? What am I cultivating? I'm cultivating the power of virtue. I'm relating with positively with material things. I'm not I I'm not um I'm not identifying myself with material things. I have an identity that actually transcends my body. And then there's the power of um um where I stop nourishing what is bad for me. Then there's the power of aspiration, where I have a view of myself that transcends this life. So I have long-term objectives, and then power of familiarization. I'm familiarizing myself with the beautiful things that I will be able to take with me. I mean, there's a lot to do with these five powers in front of death. So what do you do in your life? I try to live a life that's healthy and coherent so that I can die well when that moment will be. And at the same time, what does that mean? It means I try to be the best version of myself, to also do something good for others, to do something good for the planet that I found myself in. And plus all the other things. I love music, I work here, I work there, all of that's fine. But beyond all of that, what is the meaning? For me personally, one of the greatest, most important meanings is every action that we do, every interaction that we have, we are transforming ourselves. And we need to ask ourselves, be clear about the direction that we want to go, how we want to transform ourselves. And this takes us to another point that I take advantage to elaborate quickly here. We don't interact only with other people and transform situations by transforming ourselves. In 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 our interactions, we're also transforming. We're also a condition for the transformation of others. It's never unilateral. So in this situation now, there's interaction. I'm transforming, and you're transforming here in this place, this shared place. So we interact with people in our lives, and we are an agent of change for those that we interact with. And so what's the objective in this interaction with others? To interact in a way so that we can sustain and help others to be a better version of themselves. And here, this has a lot to do with education of children, for example. I see sometimes there's this tendency to want to direct someone so that they can be a better version of ourselves or a photocopy of ourselves. Um, yeah, we want the person to be like us. It's classic that parents want the children to be a photocopy of themselves, or the more a more advanced version of that would be wanting children to be better version of myself, or 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 better yet, it changes completely dynamics if a parent could want the child to be a better version of themselves. So we want our interaction. So our interaction should not impose how that person changes, but through my interactions, may these interactions be a positive interaction so that it can help the person transform virtuously. This is something that gives a tremendous amount of meaning to life. But instead, we do so much great. So, with everything that we do, we're constantly transforming ourselves and our environment. And what gives meaning is transforming ourselves and transforming our environment, and then as a consequence also our society. So, you know, so for it to all to all transform into transform or bring a positive transformation, if through whatever I do, if through what I do brings negative transformation, then I'm not doing something right. I mean, we live in a time, we've had technological developments that are enormous, they're incredible, and it seems that in so many aspects our life is more comfortable, is more beautiful. But when we go to see our level of health, of mental health, it doesn't seem like we're going in the right direction. So we need to reflect on this. Reflect on the fact that we should reflect on what you're doing in your life. Am I cultivating my qualities? Am I trying to be a positive interaction for the world around me? It's it's wonderful to have high objectives that have to do with societies, but I repeat, what we need more than anything else is we need loving people, joyous people, balanced people. So, so okay, so those are our objectives, and then um, we can be uh, consumers with awareness, so we can try to be beneficial with our job, etc. But uh, in one of my objectives is Kepa. I want vast and deep knowledge. I want to Sumpa. I want to have a conduct that is healthy. My way of eating, my way of interacting, my way of speaking. I want to have a healthy life in this way, moral and virtuous. And and I want to be Tsampo. Tsampo, I want to have a good heart. I want to be someone who lives his life with his, not just with his head, but with his heart. And in this way, we can say that we have a direction to follow. So first we create silence and space. It's fundamental to have a view to follow, because I talk about all these things also because I have this feeling. I hope that I'm wrong, but I have this feeling that more and more it's hard for us to find a reason to live, to find a meaning in life. I am not saying that we want to die. I'm not saying that at all. But if we were to ask around in general, what's your purpose in life? It's difficult. Is it is an answer that comes to you automatically, or do you need to think about it? That you really need to reflect on that answer. Maybe you all have this answer, and I'm the one just making this more difficult than it is. Is it hard for us or not? Yes. Also, because the world around us doesn't give us this imprint, the constant imprint to have a life's purpose. It it gives us the imprint to survive comfortably. And so our purpose in life becomes to have fun. It's just a part. There's something more. And I really hope that we're able to stop and reflect and find a direction for yourself. Otherwise, we just keep going round and round. I wanted to take advantage to, before we conclude, to share with you what we're going to do this next weekend in Albagnano. It's something quite special, and we should talk about it a little bit. Where should I start? As we've said many times, even today, we're made of habits. And our mind, our being just doesn't change from one moment to the next. It's not enough to understand. We need to have tools that help us shape ourselves in the direction that we want. And here, mm, um, when we talk about meditation, it's more familiarization. That's what becomes it's very important for us. And one of the beauties of Tibetan Buddhism, and I talk about Tibetan Buddhism because I know the other traditions relatively little. It's the enormous quantity of methods that exist. Why are there so many methods? Because we are different. We have different characteristics. But there's one aspect that's given a fundamental aspect that when we do a meditation practice, it's essential to have the transmission of that practice from someone who has received also him or herself that transmission, who has practiced that who knows that practice, has familiarity with that practice, and who has had some realizations with that practice, and is able also to transmit it. This is called lineage, and within the Vajrayana practice, and different names are given in Tibetan. Dorja Tekpa, we have Nak Tekpa, Sana, it's also called Yupa, but Gyu, which means Tantra, is the one that's used the least. But when Buddhism came to the West, the word Tantra was already known, and so that's the word that was used, Gyu. But another one is Vajrayana, or the path of the Vajra, or the Diamond Way, if you want to use a literal translation. Another name that's given is the way of secret mantra, the vehicle of secret mantra, or the 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 vehicle of the continuum or of tantra. But one fundamental aspect of this Vajrayana Buddhism is this using of the body, the using the energy of the body to help transform the mind. We use archetypes, image, sound, many characteristics, different methods that help us go in a certain direction. It's obvious that at the basis, it's necessary to have a clear direction, have love towards ourselves, have love towards others, um, have a good concentration. None of that is excluded, but there are also these techniques called gomde, normally. We translate them as sadhanas. These are techniques of recitation with visualizations, also gestures like the practice of self-healing um, that are whose purpose is to actually develop certain qualities. So Buddha, when he transmitted these techniques, there were four different levels, which they're not necessarily. It's not that you need to start with the first to get to the fourth. There are different techniques that Buddha explained according to the context and the mentality of those who were listening, or the people who were actually there. And here they're called the four classes of Tantra. There are certain rules, let's say, that were established over the centuries. And it's said that to do a practice, you need to have this empowerment, the transmission of the practice. But within the four classes of Tantra, first you need to have an empowerment from the highest Yoga Tantra, the Anuttara Yoga Tantra. You need to have had that transmission um, to then be able to do the practices of the lower tantras. And there are different practices, not that many, but among those there's Yamantaka. Yamantaka is one of the most important practices. The practice of Yamantaka has a particular characteristic. How can I explain it? It's one of the most followed and practiced practice in in our Galupa tradition. I think it's probably the most recited tract practice. But we use this wrathful energy, this energy of opposition, but the experience of the practitioner is a peaceful one. It's a little bit like, it's as if we lived in times where our selfishness, our obsession with self gratification is so strong, is so present, that we say to ourselves, no, like saying, oh, you should be like this. No, it doesn't work. We need something really strong that stops us somehow. But it doesn't happen on a conceptual level. It's not, oh, I understood this and this is what I experienced. I've seen many people with the practice of Yamataka, they actually feel more at peace and more calmer. And it's also a practice. It's a practice used to pacify inner and outer conflicts or tensions, conflicts. It's a very important practice and empowerment. It will be done in a traditional way, following the passages, the steps that have been given centuries ago in Tibet. We'll do it like this. And there's always an it's an introduction, not just for the practice of Yamantaka itself, where one can connect and with that type of energy, but it also allows you to do other sadhanas. So what I'd like to say is the following: this empowerment that is maybe is given once every 2, 3 years. Um, those of you who are interested in deepening your experience with the Vajrayana practice, this is a wonderful opportunity and important. I remember when I was a boy, Lama Gangchen Rinpoche um, asked there he couldn't go to Brazil at that moment, but his friend, his master Gelik Rinpoche was going, and Rinpoche asked Gelik Rinpoche to give the empowerment of Yamantaka. It's very important. Yamantaka represents as well. He's said to be the wrathful form of Manjushri, the Buddha of wisdom, in this wrathful form, this energy of opposition. For me, it's like this is like the slap in the face of ignorance, in the face of it's wisdom in the face of ignorance. And this enough is really quite direct. This and but within it's a generates this peaceful experience. So those of you have the interest, have the possibility. It's an important experience to be able to do to follow this empowerment, and this is what we will be doing this weekend in Albagnano, and the retreat. Um, won't come right away because I'm going to the United States, where there's the reincarnation of Lama Gangchen's guru, master, Chögyam Rinpoche, and it's been a long time waiting for me to go there, but with COVID, etc., I wasn't able to go. But now, in this period, there will be a specific ceremony, the 27th and the 28th of May. So I won't be here next week. I won't be here for the next 2 Wednesdays. What else? What I'd like to say to remind you one more time, um, I'm not, and I'm not afraid the trip has nothing to do with that, but we don't have this real awareness of when we're going to die. And the more I think about it, the harder it is for me. Harder it is for me when I'm teaching to get into to topics that I don't think are to get into topics that I don't find essential. And for me, what's the most important, not for me specifically, but for you, and then for me, that's what I try to share. So let's try to give the best of what we can every day, and that really is what will make the difference in our lives. Otherwise, the days go by, the weeks go by, the months go by, and then we, when we look back, we've just practiced the dynamics that we already know, the conditionings we already know. And I'm sorry, I'm so boring. I'll repeat it again and again. But really, let's take the reins of the situation in our own hands. Many of you have already. Those of you who already have the reins tightly in your hand, keep on like that. But let's remember just we have to remember many things, but just this one. Let's remember that the spiritual path, that this, that as the growth as a human being is like an X, or rather, at the starting point, there's a lower point and a higher point, and at the arrival point, your starting point becomes higher, and your so at this starting point that's low, these are it's the effort that we need, and the highest point is the level of our of mental defilements. As if it's like when we have to clean the the more gross level of cleaning, um, that doesn't require that much effort, but actually getting rid of all those stains. So what this means that the more the mental defilement is superficial and on a gross level, the less effort we need to put in. And then the opposite is true. At the so it's normal at the beginning we say, "Oh, I feel so much benefit from the practice." Um, but then after time, you need to go deeper. You have to put in more effort to get rid of the more subtle mental defilements. It's like if you have to clean up after a party. At first, you can just sweep away. But then after you've thrown away all the garbage, you see all the stains on the floor, and might seem like after 3 days that nothing's changed, but that's not true. So here we need high objective, low expectation, and constant effort. And let's remember that this all needs to be done with a tremendous amount of affection towards ourselves and perseverance. It's time for our dedications.
Jetsun lame kotse rapten chi namkra chinle chochur gepa dang losan tempe dreme sasum ki drove munsela tato ne gyuru chi kewa kuntu yanda lamad dralme cheki pela longche chi sadan lamge yente rabzu Dorje change kopa nyur tobe sho nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delekshin ninsen takto delekpe koncho sumki chingi lop koncho sumki ngodrubotso sumki trashi shon
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
Om Mani Padme Hum.
Tashidele, and thank you,
Aspettiamo
everyone.
qui
We will see
la
each other here in Milan
fra qualche settimana.
in a few weeks'
Nel
time.
senso che
In
nel
the
mese
sense,
di giugno
in
non c'è nulla perché io
in
teoricamente sarei dovuto andare in Brasile, cosa
in
che non riesco a fare.
in June, I was
E
supposed
visto
to
che siamo
go
qua, devo ancora
to
capire cosa
I
sto
was
per
supposed to go to
andare, perché non
Brazil,
riesco ad andare.
but I won't be
E
able to go to Brazil
secondo
because there's
quanto
so
mi
much to
dice tu,
do.
Brasile ci
Um,
metti, sarà pure una bella
Surely we'll be
delusione.
able to fit
Sì,
in
sempre così,
some
vedremo.
Wednesday here at the Kunpen. And as Lama
Diciamo
Gangchen used to
wow,
say, see you
veramente
sometimes, see you other times. So we'll see you here in
molto
Albaniano.
sì.
Thank you.